Around a month ago, I released a video on Sonic Superstars. I didn't like it very much, and while a vast majority of viewers out there agreed with me, there were quite a few that didn't. And that's perfectly fine, I wouldn't expect everyone out there to conform to my takes. Heroes is the best game in the series. As I was writing this, a Heroes remake has been all but officially announced. I win again. But among the respectful criticisms towards what I had to say and the folks giving their own input as to what they'd like/dislike about Superstars, I began to notice one frequent comment. Well, Superstars isn't great or anything, but hey, at least it's miles better than Sonic Mania. And I'm just sat there thinking, what? We don't like Mania now? Sonic Mania, the highest rated Sonic game in 25 years that everybody absolutely adored? That's Sonic Mania? Now, this is not a new phenomenon when it comes to Sonic games. Everyone has joked about it at this point, but it's because it reigns true. A Sonic game will come out and fail to meet expectations, people will rag on it, enough time will pass for folks to forget about or not experience the disappointment that came with its release, and so we'll see an uptick in defenders for it. Now, on the flip side, a Sonic game will come out and, albeit rarely, completely meet expectations with flying colors. Everyone will praise it for months and months, until eventually folks get tired of seeing the same example being used to detract from other Sonic stuff and start to take it as a sign of said example being overrated. This is the scenario we find ourselves in with Mania and Superstars, with it being used as the mean comparison and Superstars obviously not being able to hold a candle to it. In my opinion. It means now we have to nitpick Mania to hell and back to provide reasoning for why the current Sonic stuff is better because I have to defend my purchases for some reason. The funniest part is I can remember when Mania came out and everyone joked about that trend by saying stuff like, can't wait for 5 years from now when people start to say Mania actually sucked. And now here we are, we're living it. Now let me be real here. I ain't the biggest Mania head out there. I was so starved for new good Sonic stuff back when it released that I couldn't put it down. I would play it consistently every day for weeks, filling out every save file for it on every console I owned. I played it so much that honestly, I got a little burnt out. And so I haven't played it in years. And then for a while, also started to be of the belief that Mania isn't anything all that amazing. But then I played it yesterday and I'm a fucking idiot. Mania is fantastic. Sometimes when revisiting a game, I'll be shocked to see how much my opinion differs. Sonic Adventure 2 blew my mind as a kid, but then I played it a couple years later and could not stand it. But Mania is the opposite case, where I really loved it when it came out, started to get sick of it, yet upon putting it down for a while and revisiting it, I've been able to once again appreciate it for what it is. A good game. It's not perfect, and I'll be sure to point out its flaws later, but today, even just as a reminder to myself, I wanted to take some time to talk about Sonic Mania. The good, the bad, why opinions of it have changed so much, but ultimately, why I think at the end of the day it's just fundamentally fun. Possibly the biggest critique you'll find towards Sonic Mania out there is its lack of innovation, and nothing displays that greater in my opinion than the story. I won't lie, I was incredibly disappointed to watch that leaked livestream someone did a couple days before the game came out, only to see it open in a near identical way as Sonic 3, for no other reason than, remember Sonic 3. Throughout the game there's a variety of charming level transitions and a bunch of personality packed into the animation, however it can't save the fact that some of the stuff just makes little to no sense. You get no reason for why any of this is really happening when looking at the game on its own. I don't really count manual descriptions or YouTube shorts. This is the future, dude. You don't need all these external explanations. Just do it in the game. And so for a majority of it, you're just kind of watching stuff happen. I'm in Press Garden Zone. Oh, there's Eggman looking at Little Planet from Sonic CD. Okay, oh I'm there, okay. Now I'm running into the future. Suddenly Metal Sonic. Alright, pretty sure they used to try and innovate on the mechanical rivals, not just copy the existing one, but okay, I'll deal with it. No, it's a rendition of the final boss of Knuckles Chaotix, and well, no, I'm just back to Sonic 3. Am I still in the future, or whatever, this music rocks. It's a tad sloppy. I'm aware the blame here lies squarely on Sega, not the talented developers at Headcanon or Christian Whitehead Studios, through forcing them to stick to this revisiting classic location shtick they've been obsessed with for over a decade now. But it still sucks, there's no way around it. They clearly gave it their all, but there was most likely not enough time to make something coherent out of this, especially with the scrapped concept of Eggman being depressed and his egg robos running amok, being swapped out in favor of a plotline that easily allows them to integrate the story with the 3D release at the time, Sonic Forces, with the Phantom Ruby being the end-all be-all explanation for why we're flung all over the place. But I digress, it's bad. But at the same time, none of this bothers me that much. Why? Because the story is a mere footnote in this game. Similarly to Generations, it's nothing more than an excuse to have you revisit these disparate locations. And so in that regard, I think it's fine, harmless, you know? The game, at the very least, doesn't frequently stop to have the characters stand around, weaving their arms in the air, pantomiming different actions and phrases. It's short and to the point. I would rather that than if it were to try and attempt to explain something more ambitious through bizarrely, easily avoidable optional stages, yet will still act as if you've played them later on, even if you skipped it, and... Okay, I apologize, but get ready for some comparisons here and there. I'm not going to be able to help myself. I think what I like most about Mania is something that might confuse some of you out there. A common discussion with Sonic games is the level of ambition present. A mediocre game can be lifted up in the eyes of the fandom, depending on how many good ideas it contains, allowing people to almost envision a game that isn't really there. I understand this mindset a lot. It's hard not to look at games like 06 and see the potential. But Mania is one of the only Sonic games out there, in my opinion, that sets its goal low. And because of that, has no problem in absolutely crushing it. That's not to say Mania isn't a feat, however. I feel like saying it sets its goals low implies an inherent lower quality, but that's not what I'm saying at all. For example, I would rather a Sonic game feature, let's say 18 levels that are all incredibly fun, with a couple neat boss fights and a story that at the very least isn't intrusive at all, over a Sonic game with, let's say, 30 levels that are all jarringly simple and underbaked, basic bosses that feel more like Temple Run than an actual Sonic game, and a story that's too ambitious for its own good, and therefore doesn't really get to explore any of its interesting ideas. I pull up the curtain editor, there we go. And it really is a marvel that Mania managed to come out when it did. The Sonic drought, as fans dubbed it, was in full effect. It had been 4 long years since the last mainline Sonic game, 6 years since the last good one. And after 3 years of the boom experiment, it was as if Sega were apologizing for letting the series go so far astray. The trailer hyping people up with the promise to go back and try to rediscover what made Sonic so successful in the first place. And at that point in time, that was important and reassuring. Because of that, I see some folks out there claim that to be where a majority of Mania's praise comes from, the fact that it came out at a time when expectations could not have been lower, and therefore it was much easier for people to look past its glaring issues. Now looking back and claiming that the game wasn't really anything special. But I could not disagree more with that assessment. Everything with Sonic Mania just clicks. Right off the bat, there's an incredibly fun vibe to it that just screams confidence. It's infectious. The charming opening animation, the smooth and well-animated title cutscene, the menu design, the music. It's made loud and clear that this was an evolution on classic Sonic, not a retread. But of course you don't fix what ain't broke. And so I love the approach of keeping what worked about Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and instead of trying to do something drastically different, it instead aims to refine and improve upon it. For example, it keeps the 2 acts per zone with a boss after each act, the first being more quick and simple, usually facing off against a mindless badnik or one of the newly introduced hard-boiled heavies, and the second act being a battle with Eggman. It sticks to that structure all the way to the very end, where it then chooses to combine these elements together, the final boss having you switch between fighting Robotnik and the Egg Robos, and a final boss showcasing a fight in which you're stuck in the middle of a war between these two foes. That boss kinda sucks, admittedly, but we'll get to it. The zones are all vibrant and colorful. There's a clear effort on the team's part to not just simply take the aesthetics of old and slap them together haphazardly, with every single pixel being completely remade from the ground up, which not only allows for them to improve the visuals in comparison to their original counterparts, but also incorporate many scrapped features that were cut from the classics. For example, Green Hill Act 1 is a fairly faithful recreation of the aesthetic present in Sonic 1, whereas Act 2 begins by starting you in the caverns only ever really explored before in Generations' rendition of the level, before launching you up in the air, allowing you to get a look at the distant mountains and hills, which before had only ever really been seen in the lost prototype for the original game. There's such a level of love and care for the source material that has been meticulously poured into this adventure, and because of that, it's hard for me to look at this as a soulless rework of previous zones solely for the purpose of saving time, money, and banking on nostalgia. To me, the goal of Sonic Mania from a design standpoint was clearly subverting longtime fans' expectations, roping them in with something familiar, and then wham! You're fighting the Death Egg robot as fucking boss number 1. But it's like people have stopped seeing that subversion now that things have settled and everybody knows this game like the back of their hand. I can understand that with the game being, oh my god, 7 years old, a lot of that initial shock and awe and seeing stuff like the Hooligan's Return or the Puyo Puyo boss fight might have worn off a little. But I don't think that discredits the game at all. These are still solid and fun subversions. The only real point I can somewhat agree with here is the idea that with the game reusing so much aesthetically from other Sonic games, and not explicitly being for any celebratory purpose like in Generations, it causes it to become one of the lesser memorable classic Sonic outings, compared to the ones that are solely original. But I don't think that makes Mania any less good. And if anything, from my experience, it's made it more fun and surprising to revisit, to rediscover just how much of this game is new content, and elevates the source material to be what genuinely might be the best classic Sonic game purely from a gameplay standpoint. Now what does that mean? Obviously, if you think it's the best classic Sonic, of course that would be from a gameplay standpoint. And that's where things get a little tricky. See, I've always been of the belief that there's more to a game than just how it plays, graphics, story, music. A game can have none of that and still be good, but those other aspects have the ability to raise my perception on something, either for better or worse. I'm gonna view an okay game with stellar presentation of music at a higher level than an okay game with mediocre presentation and forgettable music. Perfect example my mind always jumps to: Generations versus Unleashed. Which has the better gameplay? Well, Generations, of course. It's much more polished, focused, and in all honesty, it's just a more refined take on the gameplay of Unleashed. But which is the better game? Now that is a little more up for interpretation. Generations undoubtedly has better gameplay, however, I'd argue that Unleashed is the better overall experience. Sega has always struggled when it comes to how much they want to incorporate their arcade roots into their games, and this comparison is the prime case of that. When I play Generations, it's to intake the levels and nothing more, try to get a better time. You won't catch me clawing to replay those bonus missions. I'm not going to bother restarting from the beginning because I just want to have a fun time, quickly going in and out of my favorite stages. Nothing more. However, when I play Unleashed, I'm in it for the long haul. I want to start from the beginning and get the opportunity again to take it all in, explore the hub worlds, talk to the town folk, play the extra acts, watch the cutscenes. It's why simply just modding the Unleashed data levels into Generations, while cool, will never replace the feeling of playing that game as a package. And the trade-off with that is of course having to deal with those more annoying bits. With Mania, it's the exact same thing. It's the most polished classic Sonic game with the least amount of levels that I would deem unfun. It's why it was so addicting for me to replay it from start to finish over and over again when it came out. It is, in my opinion, the best classic Sonic game. But there's just something that can't be replicated when it comes to putting in Sonic 3 and Knuckles and getting the chance to re-experience that again. Watching the cool vignettes that tried to tell what was, at the time, an incredibly ambitious story for a sprite-based 2D platformer in the 90s. Listening to the amazing soundtrack, seeing how much effort went into making each stage feel coherent, part of one massive world. Exploring pretty much the entirety of Angel Island. It's fantastic. But then you get to Sandopolis and have to deal with the annoying ghost gimmick. You have to deal with Flying Battery in general, just not being very fun. Same with Carnival Night, I kinda hate that stage, honestly. There's a bunch of annoying aspects to that game, but when I stand back and look at the overall package, it's an amazing game that I would play any day of the week over Sonic Mania. But I still think Mania is the better game, if that makes sense. I think that's the unfortunate place it's landed itself in. It is so solid at what it tries to do that I'm sure for a lot of people out there, it's kind of sad that there isn't more to say about it beyond, I wish it had all original stages. It's why you don't see very many dedicated Mario tubers meticulously picking apart every aspect of the franchise's history. Because with quite a few Sonic games out there, the discussion is more fun than the game itself. I played Mario Wonder back when it was released, 100% of the entire thing in 2 days, said, that was fantastic, and I haven't thought about it until right now. Yet I still find myself occasionally nodding off and imagining a world in which Sonic and the Black Knight could have reached its full potential. Sorry, I'm aware I'm spending a lot of this Mania video not talking about Mania, but that almost proves my point in a way. Do I need to sit and tell you why this is a good game? Anyways, here's why Sonic Mania is a good game. You know that part of every Sonic game, hell, most games in general, where you get to that part, where you groan in boredom or tedium knowing what's about to come. Again, I think of Sandopolis Zone in Sonic 3 or Sky Chase from 2. Poor old Sonic 1 has that as soon as the second zone. Yeah, well, Mania doesn't have that moment. Sure, there's the occasional bullshittery. Honestly, my biggest critique towards Mania would have to be the hit detection when it comes to getting crushed that happens way too often in places it shouldn't. But there's no singular moment in Sonic Mania that I can point to and go, that sucks. Some may argue the Oil Ocean Act 2 boss, with it being incredibly long and forcing you to sit through drawn-out attack sequences. Boy, it sure would suck if every boss were like this. But other than that minute-long fight, Mania is basically flawless in my opinion, perfecting what worked well about what came before and cleverly not playing favorites when it comes to which game to pull inspiration from. Except for Sonic 1, get fucked. It's the perfect culmination of the classic tetralogy, there we go. It features the heavily vertical focused platforming a CD with layers upon layers of level to explore, constantly weaving in and out of each other. The special stage and boss system of 3 along with the elemental shields, with the occasional breather most prominent in Sonic 2 where they send you through endless spectacles zipping from dashpad to dashpad for a bit. I also think this is one of the only Sonic games that really perfected that 3-lane level design. You know, the top path is harder to stay on, but way more rewarding. The middle path is neutral, and the bottom is slower and more full of hazards. So many levels in this game start by presenting you with those 3 different pathways. You know, my mind immediately jumps to Stardust Speedway Act 2, or Chemical Plant, or Hydro City Act 1. If you just do nothing and go forward, you're gonna hit the middle thing right here, taking you to the neutral pathway. But if you make more of an effort to jump to the next one before that other one pulls you away, you'll get sent up to the top pathway. And if you for some reason fuck up at doing nothing basically, you'll get sent in the lower one, where it's obviously more easy to draw in. That's Sonic level design at its best to me, and it's so deceptively simple. But where I think Mania really shines is in the gimmicks. Like I said in my Superstars video, my favorite kind of Sonic gimmick is the one that's integrated into the level, usually eating towards a greater sense of movement. And Mania is, I think, the best at doing this out of the history of the franchise. Not just each zone, each act has a plethora of unique and fun mechanics that are all designed around Sonic speed, eating your flow. If it wasn't easy enough to already tell that was their goal with the newly added drop dash ability, letting you spin dash as soon as you hit the grind after jumping, this was clearly such an ingenious and obvious extension of Sonic's moveset that it's since then managed to appear in every single mainline Sonic game. That's only like 3 games, but it's evidently here to stay. I'm not going to sit and go over every level like I did with Superstars, mainly because this game is so consistently good that there's no need to, but I want to take a moment to highlight some of my favorite stages and moments from the game that stick out to me. And it would be easy to say, oh, just all the original levels. But if I'm being quite honest, some of my favorite stages in this game are the reused ones, because of this team's ability to subvert my expectations and leave me almost in a way viewing it as a completely different zone compared to its original counterparts, with new ideas and gimmicks galore. I love the second act of Chemical Plant just for how kinetic everything is. Kinetic is the word I'd use to describe Mania the best. Everything just fits, and a stage like this is the perfect example of it, immediately introducing you to the new syringe mechanic. That sounds weird out of context. There's these large syringes that upon standing on top of will inject the infamous Mega Muck, yes that's really what it's called, turning it into a green goopy trampoline, allowing you to traverse higher up in the level, carrying your momentum as you do so. Metallic Madness focuses on a concept that wasn't really seen in classic Sonic games before then, with certain seesaws shooting you off into the background to run around what's basically a completely alternate route, with further seesaws trying to shoot you back into the foreground, and the further you get while avoiding them, the more the level you end up getting to skip. Stardust Speedway is incredibly fun, both acts, but I think I enjoy Act 2 a lot more just because of their willingness to go all out and throw springs and automated tunnels sending you all over the place. It all feels intentional in a way where, in any other Sonic game, it could run the risk of seeming lazy, just slapping shit together. But everything is designed to constantly keep you moving. You can be running down a slope to whack your face only to get caught in a bungee cord and be launched back up in the air, with the potential to land on a firework that once again shoots you off into the sky where you're greeted with fireworks and fun constellations. It's incredibly exhilarating. My favorite stage by far though would have to be Mirage Saloon Act 2. It just might be my top level in all of classic Sonic. It's not terribly challenging and I wish it were longer, but everything feels as if it's just effortlessly working together, with what feels like an endless amount of unique and cool mechanics. Loop-de-loops made out of sand so when you run through them they dissolve, pinball bumpers you can use to whack off light bulbs for added height, seltzer bottles you can step on to create alternate terrain to traverse, all with little bar stools you can hop on that launch you in a certain direction. This is a stage that feels lived in, an actual world that you're running through and not just a video game level. Mania is filled with acts like this, too many to name all of them, but you can tell this was made by a team who just knew what was cool. This theme of subversion is only further exemplified through the boss fights, which are not only immensely creative, but also fun. Of course, I've mentioned the Mean Bean Machine fight and the Death Egg Robot, but you've got the hard-boiled heavy battles, special shoutouts to the first appearance of Beanbark and Fang in ages, you've got the cool spider boss from Flying Battery where you have to use physics to whack the thing into spikes, or the simple yet incredibly charming switcheroo in Hydro City. Hydro City. They're not all winners, and again, I really wish that final boss didn't have to be rushed so hard, with added assets spawned in the game files implying something much bigger had been planned. But the worst a boss ever is in Mania is too easy, gone in 10 seconds, and I would take that any day of the week against a tedious fight that can go on for an upwards of 3 minutes. And on top of all that, it boasts one of the greatest soundtracks in the franchise's history. Just about every track is so incredibly memorable and catchy, more often than not being infinitely greater than the originals. It's almost hard to appreciate, there's too much. Get this, all of this for $20. Wow, what a steal. And if that wasn't enough bang for your britches, they've only added a whole expansion for a measly $5 extra. People were quite harsh towards Mania Plus, which was bizarre to me because again, $5. But it was evident the team had something much bigger planned here that wasn't able to be achieved due to Sega most likely rushing them. I remember when IGN gave this thing a 7 out of 10 and people threw a fit. Wait, no, that is fucking dumb, a 7? Not only do you get what's, in a sense, an expanded version of the Knuckles story from Sonic 3 where you get to see a brief, almost epilogue in a way to the events that transpired after the main adventure, just a massive coincidence that they always end up having to go through the whole thing again in the exact same order. If I was Sonic, I would be pissed. But for what's here, for $5? What more could you want? Every level has been slightly redesigned with different level design in a lot of places, usually to accommodate the unique abilities of newcomers Ray and Mighty in their first playable appearance in over 2 decades, both of which are seriously fun to use, with Ray being an absolute highlight. There's also a few new mechanics, such as the pinball table and the player system, where instead of having lives, you simply gather up characters to swap through either on the fly or cycling one out after getting killed, allowing you to further keep the flow going without having to go back to a checkpoint. But honestly, I think Encore Mode is better than the main game, purely for keeping everything that worked and tossing out what didn't. Biggest example of that is them getting rid of the original Mirage Saloon Act 1, which in the main is a neat but ultimately weak homage to the already not very fun Sky Chase Zone from Sonic 2. But here they replace it with an entire new act, going through areas that were previously only visited by Knuckles in his playthrough of the game. You know, Sega, if you really wanted to make a cool new 2D Sonic game, you should expand upon this idea, honing more in on every playable character going through their own unique zones, or at the very least different level design that focuses on their unique strengths, more like the 3D games. I know you tried that, just don't make it optional. And only 4 in the whole fucking thing. And I know what you're thinking, but where's the Lego skin? But all this is to say, ultimately, Sonic Mania is a fun game, and I like it. Sure, it loses a bit of its own identity due to sharing many of its aesthetics with games that came before, but Mania does something not a lot of Sonic games managed to do, and that's evolve on what worked before while scrapping what didn't. It was a stylish home run that features some of the best levels in the franchise, and in 9 cases out of 10 surpasses the levels they're paying respect to. It came out at a very depressing time to be a Sonic fan, and I'm not denying that undoubtedly contributed to so much of the praise it got. But no matter what state the franchise was or ever will be in, one thing is never going to change in my eyes, and it's that Sonic Mania is a masterpiece that at this point in time hasn't been topped. In my opinion.